pressing issue that's facing millions of Indian households: inflation versus wage hikes. And the question is the middle class really fighting a losing battle? India's largest IT firms are deferring their salary hikes. There's a lot of global uncertainty on the back of which we are seeing this deferring of wage hikes, and the middle class is finding itself grappling. There are rising living costs to contend with, especially in housing, also in food, and we've been covering that. The depreciation of the Indian rupee is also hitting them hard. So what must the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman do? What should she prioritize in the upcoming union budget to alleviate some of these pressures on the common man? We've got a strong panel of distinguished guests joining us. Amarpal Chadha is a tax partner at EY India, and he's joining us with insights on potential tax relief and fiscal policies as well. Ramani Dati is the CFO of Teamly Services, and she joins us for the implications of the deferred wage hikes and the broader job market. Vijay Sardana also joining us, an expert in agri-businesses. He gets us perspective on food inflation and its impact on household budgets. Let me come to you first, Mr. Sardana. In your reading, how severe is the affordability crisis today among the middle class when it comes to roti, something that you track very closely, but also kapda and makan?
To all of you fellow panelists and the viewers. See, around the world, if you look into, the first thing which people invest is that is in your basic nutrition, food and diet. Minute you increase the food inflation, the money goes to food, and every other aspect people start cutting down. And that is why, if you look into around the world, the focus is always to contain and control the food inflation. And if any society which is not able to contain food inflation, economic crisis, or I will say that discretionary discretionary income will always go down. And that impacts non-essential services like white goods, tourism, whole lot of other things. So it is very, very important. And second, the immediate pressure comes up is on the wages. The labor will start demanding, we need better price. Farmers are talking about, we need better returns. Everybody will start talking about, and that has a cascading effect, because common man, which is unorganized industry, you go and talk to rickshawala, you go and talk to cab wala, they will start demanding more money for the same work, because they say food is very expensive, we have to charge more. So what we have to understand here is that if we are not able to control food economy, it will have both social implication, health implication, economic implication, and it will have its own, side effect on political crisis.
Right.
So we have to.
So there is a cascading effect that you say if you're not able to control food inflation, and I'll ask you in a moment whether we are doing a good enough job to control food inflation. But Amarpal Chadha, you just heard what Vijay Sardana has said. Controlling food inflation remains a critical area, and that, of course, depends on a whole host of factors, but it is going to have a bearing on discretionary spending as well, and wage hikes. Now, that's a problem area today. If you consider a young man, a young lady whose family spends about 15 lakhs on higher education, enters the job market, then starts earning, finds her or himself in the top tax bracket once good performance sets in at the place of work, is this person not getting burdened way too early with that high inflation and low wage rises today, especially after COVID? Do tell me what you think about this.
So Vikram, great point, and I think Mrs. Sardana really summarized it well. From a tax perspective, Vikram, although our slabs start pretty early, only up to 3 lakhs, the slab is exempt. The first slab starts from 3 lakhs. So I think that's one way to look at it, that if the government really wants to give some level of benefit, that initial entry point could go up, let's say, from a 3 lakh to 5 lakh. We've all in the new concessional tax regime, which gives a much better tax treatment as compared to the old one, and very aligned to the youngsters today, because it takes you away from all exemptions and deductions from all historical thing. Very simple tax system focusing just on the income earned and the kind of taxes that need to be paid. So my view is if the threshold goes a little bit higher, it would help the younger ones, specifically the audience you mentioned, who have an entry-level tax. So I think that's one good way to do it. There are other measures within the tax system that can be looked into from a housing and other perspective. The other one which the youngsters mostly spend on is the rent or the housing that they buy for themselves. So those are the areas where the government could actually give some relief.
Can be a relief even as we are seeing wage rises stall in current times. I want to ask Ramani Dati about this. But before I come to you, Ramani, just listen in to what we got from Mohandas Pai. He's the former CFO of Infosys. He's emphasizing the need for fairness in business practices. He's urging the Prime Minister and Finance Minister to provide significant tax relief to middle-class taxpayers in the upcoming budget. Listen to what he said.
After 13 years, you're paying maybe 15% more. How is it justified? What are the CEO paid in 2011? What the CEO paid now? Look at the data. I think fairness has to come in. We don't want our businesses to become mercenary organization, which many of them are becoming. And, I find nothing wrong in pursuing profit. They must pursue profit. But I think fairness has to be there in whatever they do.
Corporates must push for profits, but it must be doing this in fairness. Ramani Dati, that view coming in from Mohandas Pai, do you agree with it? Also, now with the IT sector delaying some salary hikes because of global uncertainties, that's definitely going to impact job market trends, right? Especially in a sector known for high attrition rates. How do you see that panning out?
Absolutely, Vikram. So let me answer this question both for IT and non-IT.
Sure.
In non-IT, there has been a consistent wage inflation of 7 to 8% over the last few years, which is in line with the retail inflation. But outside of the retail inflation, we are seeing the largest inflation mainly in healthcare, education, housing. And the 7-8% is not in line with the increase in cost of living these days. And within IT, whatever low inflation that we are talking about is also to some extent the correction that is in line with the unusual salary hikes that we have seen in IT during the COVID time. And last 2 years, they are in very low single digit hikes, which is like 2 to 4%. And we are expecting recovery starting next year within IT. While non-IT may continue at 7-8%, we may see a higher attrition, especially at entry levels. It's already at 30-40%. And one of the biggest complaint from entry-level employees for high attrition is that low salaries and work-life balance. So companies have to do something about these two areas in order to control the attrition at entry levels.
Do you think that companies are underestimating the risk of employee dissatisfaction and potential talent drain because of these deferred wage hikes?
That's right.
You think that's happening? That companies are not really factoring in how dissatisfied employees could react if wage hikes don't keep up with the kind of inflation that we are seeing for one?
That's definitely is already on the table, Vikram, and many companies are evaluating the wage hikes because the 7-8% is definitely not keeping the employees satisfied considering the increase in cost of living. And apart from these, the biggest constraint at entry-level jobs is almost 35 to 40% of statutory deductions, especially when an employee's salary is under 25,000. Almost 40% of their CTC goes into statutory deductions, like 24% of PF, 6% of ESIC. These are the biggest confiscations that are happening, like even the employee getting it on the hand salary.
Understand the kind of impact that inflation has, and food inflation in particular. Vijay Sardana, you said that this has a cascading effect because if you spend more on food, then everything else takes a backseat. In October last year, we hit 10.87% when it comes to food inflation. For the average household, how much are they actually spending on essentials compared to what they did last year in the current context? And how much are we doing to control our food inflation at this point in time? Is it enough?
See, you have to appreciate that, we keep talking about America or developed nations. Take example even of Middle East. They don't produce anything, but food is cheaper even in Dubai, if you look into the comparative salaries. So there is a thumb rule that food cost of the salary or income of a person should not be more than 30% of the income. How much a common man is doing in India? Even that's what I'm saying, that agriculture, especially food management in India, we talk about food security when it comes to production number. But the problem is that we don't have a consumption detail. How much is consumed and at what price and from where it is going and who are the middlemen.
Right.
Unfortunately, in food inflation, farmers are unhappy because they are not getting the price. On the other hand, consumers are unhappy because they have to pay a hefty price. this whole mismanagement in food system is going to have a very serious political toll.
So,
What we have to understand in this whole appreciation is that government of India, I always say that where is the food security plan of India?
right.
I have never seen it. Any state government, one side we say agriculture is state subject, none of the state government has a food, I will say
You've
food
underlined that time and
security
again.
plan.
You've underlined that time and again. When it comes to the upcoming budget, you're saying that it is a state subject. But what do you see happening? Because you've seen budgets over a period of time, over the last 10 years. How much are we doing to be able to control price rise in food?
I don't see anything except maybe there will be some subsidy for warehousing. There may be some subsidy here and there just to tell people that we are serious. But when it comes to implementation, execution, it makes no sense because one side you give subsidy to create a warehousing, on the other side you bring the stock limits. So private sector is not interested in investing in it. So what we have to look into very, very clearly that there has to be a clarity. That is what I'm repeatedly telling government of India from last 20 years. Where is your food security plan?
Yes.
You don't know how much potatoes are required. You don't know how much tomatoes are required. Who will produce where? What type of seeds are required? What type of inputs are required? What type of logistic systems are required? Nothing. It is all Ram Bharose.
So brass
That is
tacks,
one first
something
part.
that we need to go back to. But Amarpal Chadda, when you talk about these pressures, inflationary pressures, and those keep mounting, there are tax relief measures that the government can at least bring in. What would you suggest just to ease the burden on the middle class right now? What do you think they should be doing?
So, Vikram, given the government's theme is towards simplification, and you started by saying a new act may come more reliefs, I think given the theme, there could be just two, three things which the government could actually do to bring impact on the individual. One, like what I mentioned, increase first the threshold limit for taxes. Instead of 3 lakhs, maybe push it to 5. Second, look at the tax rate. The maximum marginal rate, 30%, can it click much later? Can we take the threshold to 30% so that there is more disposable income? And third, which is also the mandate which the government is following, is simplification of the language so that one, there is clear tax position that a taxpayer can take and avoid any litigation which creates a bad experience. So, according to me, these three things would really help everyone, including the people who require the entry level of a little bit more bandwidth to manage their finances, and to the people who are in the middle income who've started their families and require more disposable income for their children and others. So, these are the three things, Vikram, which I would go with.
Also, there's been talk of raising the exemption limit for housing loans. How could that kind of move impact both home ownership, of course, and overall economic activity?
See, definitely it helps. Anything on the home loans would get, but under the new tax regime, there are limitations on the kind of deductions you get. So you will have to balance because most of the youngsters and the people are moving towards the new tax regime, which is also referred as the concessional tax regime. So if you balance that, you also know that there is only a set off of house property loss up to 2 lakhs. So if that limit is enhanced, some of this, anything would help on the housing side. We all know rentals has become the biggest cost and people are trying to buy more houses to balance both sides. So any change on housing would definitely help.
The scenario as of now, Ramani, looking at the kind of inputs that we are getting as far as inflation is concerned, looking at the taxation scenario as well, for employees today, there is a tepid job market, to say the least. Do you believe that this deferring of salary hikes could lead to a more cautious spending behavior among consumers, among the people who are working in these companies? How may that affect broader economic recovery according to you? How much of that is in your research?
Vikram, this definitely affects, and we being in the business of staffing, catering to almost 3,000 plus clients, we have seen that impact, especially in the last festive season. So typically for us, Q3 used to be one of the highest contributor in terms of new headcount addition, more number of employee hirings happening during the Dasara Diwali festive season. So whereas this time we didn't see any kind of spike in Q3 around the festive season, it has been kind of at the same level as it is in Q1 and Q2. So this has definitely impacted the consumer spending, and it also has impacted the number of new jobs that are getting created.
Discretionary spending already weak, and we've talked about how food inflation puts everything else on the back seat, including discretionary spending. Do tell us, Ramani, how can employers balance cost cutting? Trying to maintain a motivated workforce is one part of it, and it's an important piece as well. But that is something that companies will have to work on.
Yes, Vikram, but again, we cannot expect everything just from the companies to contribute on employee saving. From government side, it is welcoming that in the last year interim budget, they have announced certain subsidies, especially for employees who are first time empaneling with EPFO. So which is good, but we have to see the notification, the final guidelines and notification on how it is going to get implemented. So those kind of measures can definitely help employees to have a slightly higher take home salary for them. In addition to that, there are two specific recommendations that we would like to put forth. So one is for the first 2 years of a formal employment, give a choice to the employee whether they want to contribute to the provident fund or not. Because especially at entry level, someone who is 21, 22-year-old, they don't think much about the retirement benefits that they would get after 50 years or 60 years. So for them, take home is more important. So first 2 years, we would propose PF to be not to be mandatory, but to be at the option of the employee. Second is the ESIC contribution, because there is no other insurance in the world where the claim ratio is less than 90%, whereas for ESIC, the claim ratio is less than 40%. So employees are mandated to contribute to ESIC, but they are not going to the government hospitals. They are ending up spending more money in private hospitals. So even for insurance to make it a choice for an employee whether they want to contribute to ESIC or to a private insurance. So these two initiatives can definitely leave more salary in the hands of an employee.
That one would imagine should be the government's push. As we see consumption coming down, Mr. Sardana, we're talking a lot about how urban households are getting pressured right now. What about rural households? They spend a significant portion of their income on non-food items. So how has inflation in these areas compared with urban settings? What targeted measures could really help our aspirational rural communities, you think?
See, you have to appreciate two things there. In one way, it appears that rural community will be better off because food production is local. They don't have to pay the prices like 50 rupees a kg in rural area. But there are a whole lot of other things which they import from city or production centers, whether it is textile, whether it is shoes, whether it is petrol, whether it's a two-wheeler, whole lot of other things other than what they produce locally in the village. And what they produce locally in the village is a basic nutrition. But if you look into other side of it, when it comes to animal husbandry, where they have to buy the inputs for their own farming activity, for example, cattle feed. For poultry farmer, it is poultry feed. They have to buy a lot of medicines. Everything goes up. Today, if you calculate the cost of production of milk and at what price we are getting, actually dairy is becoming a loss-making business. Poultry farmers are actually virtually break-even. If suddenly there is a spurt in the retail price, they make some money. Otherwise, they all are making losses. Look at all other crops. For example, where you are importing, look at oil seeds. MSP is 50 rupees, market price is 35. We are importing 70% of edible oil in this country for consumers' consumption. Farmers are not getting the right price. What is happening? Take a classic example of sunflower. The sunflower crop as a crop is vanishing out of India because it makes no sense for farmer to grow the crop and there is no market for it now because imported oils are much cheaper than the raw material which we are producing. Let me give you a live example. Raw material of sunflower seed is 82 rupees a kg,
right,
whereas international price is 90 to 95 rupees a kg for oil.
Right.
It makes no sense for any trader or a processor to buy from farmer and do the value addition. So we are in a very, very peculiar situation. We are not understanding 70% of oil we are importing. We are importing 3-4 million tons of pulses to keep the prices low. Our wheat, rice, sugar, corn, everything, export bans are there. We think that we are agriculture supermarket or super economy. I think we have to go back to the drawing board and come out of all these political narratives that we are self-sufficient in food.
But year on year, we talk about how the rural economy is going to fare based on the monsoons. Perhaps we need to come out of that as well. We were talking to the CEO of Hero Motorcorp, and he's telling us that there is a pickup in rural demand right now. Just listen to what he said.
If you look at 125cc, absolutely. We had lost market shares over the last 5-7 years in 125cc. We've come back very strongly through Extreme 125. From the moment of its launch, from market shares of 14%, we are now at 21%. So we've gained 700 basis point shares on the back of Extreme 125cc, which we launched. Fantastic product, received very well. In fact, in that segment, Super Splendor and Glamour have also started doing well. So I think that's the story of 125cc. As far as rural challenge is concerned, the rural challenge was more around post-COVID, where the confidence in consumption had gone down, the health cost had gone up, there were unemployment problems. I think we can see that rural is starting to come back because the benefit of the government's schemes and the capex investments are probably starting to come around. There have been good monsoon, the crop cycles have been good. We can see rural coming back. As it comes back even stronger in the next few quarters.
The expectation is that it will get better and that demand is coming back. Mr. Sardana, you heard the word coming in over there. But talking about government schemes, if they increase the daily minimum wage under Manrega from 267 rupees to 375 rupees, like CII is suggesting, do you see a significant impact?
See, overall cost of labor in India will go up. Companies are already struggling from the margins. Now what will happen? The basic labor will go up. Think of where the labor goes. One side you increase the Manrega labor, the worker who is working in Delhi in a construction site will go back to home. Then if to retain them in India, in cities, you have to increase their wages. When you increase their wages, what will happen within the city? Your cost of, again, construction will go up. You will have a shortage of labor. People, those who are still struggling, MSME, they don't get labor because what is happening? One side you are getting 375 Manrega, then you are getting a free ration, then you are getting a whole lot of other incentives. Where is the labor force available for MSME or to the other sectors? So there is already shortage of labor. You further create acute shortage. Is this good for economy? So I think we cannot look into in isolation in piecemeal. There is a crisis which is building up, but unfortunately the whole discussion in the country is around politics. We are not taking economic crisis seriously.
Mr. Chadda, I want to ask you, because every time we start talking about the budget, there is this thing that comes up about tax on the super rich to guarantee social security. Is it still a feasible solution? Could it have unintended consequences on investments and economic growth?
So Vikram, yes, that's always a debatable point, but you know, our maximum marginal rate is already quite high as compared to the benefits that are given. So even under the new tax regime, which is the concessional tax regime, the rate is 39%, which in the old regime would go up to 42% plus. So anyway, the people who earn higher income, and in our case, it's only 20 lakhs and above. So hence the ask to push the threshold higher, but the maximum margin rate is already quite high. And we are also trying to get a lot of promoters and investors to invest into the country and keep their operations here. So I think you have to balance both. Already tax rate is high. If you further go higher, you would see then people trying to plan the jurisdictions. So hence the balance is very important. And I think government is trying to do that.
How quickly they are able to pursue that cause remains to be seen. But Vijay Sardana, as we wind down this discussion, according to you, what's the most prudent way to control inflation today, according to you?
Government of India first think of what is the food security plan for the country. That will tell you where are the gaps, what you need. All the agriculture budget which is going for agriculture research are non-productive. All your infrastructure where you are doing it is not delivering what it is to be. Overall, one side you are increasing the food crisis, means basic food prices, then you say go for value addition in processed food. Again, that becomes a reverse activity. I think we have to work at many fronts. But unless there is a plan, we don't know. As an investor, if I want to know whether I should invest in cold storage for meat, or I should store it for potato, or I should go for onion, I don't know. Because there is no plan in the country. So private sector is directionless, government is directionless, state governments are technically bankrupt, they don't have money. You make a plan in center and tell the states to implement, they come back by the open mouth, they say, where is the money? You give us the money, we will implement. Central government is also under severe debt. Last year, the interest payment was 10.61 lakh, equal amount government of India borrowed from the market just to pay interest. This year, it will be surprising to see what is the interest we are paying for. So what I'm trying to say is that I think political class of India should understand it is high time go back to the drawing board.
Yes.
There is no fun in living on legacy which is expired, which is not delivering the desired results.
Amarpal Chadda, will direct tax relief or indirect measures give disposable income a boost?
I think both, a combination will always work better. It's very difficult to do only one.
So if it is a combination, and we'll see exactly what they are able to deliver, Ramani Dati, in the meantime, what's the one thing that you see companies, especially IT firms, do about the issue of salary hikes right now? What do you think they should be doing in light of what we are pegging our expectations on as far as the union budget goes?
Companies should do a fair assessment of what would be the cost of attrition and the productivity loss on employees. So if a 7-8% average salary inflation is not keeping employees happy and it's leading to higher attrition, again leading to lower productivity, they have to really assess. Because if this can have direct impact on productivity, that again having a direct impact on the company's revenues and profits. So that goes into like a loop. So this is again high time for companies to revisit their inflation levels in the salaries for the upcoming financial year.
So as we are exploring tonight, the middle class clearly navigating this complex web of economic challenges. There is wage stagnation, there is rising inflation. The union budget, of course, offers a critical chance every year for the government to introduce measures that could provide much needed relief and stability for the middle class. I want to thank our panelists for joining us with their perspective on this. Amarpal Chadda, Ramani Dati and Vijay Sardana, thank you very much for joining us with your insights here on India Tonight. It's time for us